Welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by our first ballot Hall of Famer, Sean Zerillo. And we're going to dive into the Division of Champions, the defending World Series champs, the LA Dodgers, and the NL West. Soup to nuts, top to bottom. We're going to give you every angle, win totals, who you'd like to win it, Sean, as well as some player props, some statistical options out there in the futures market. But before we jump into all of that, a bit of housekeeping. Keep an eye out for all of our divisional previews leading up to opening day. You can go back and see all 6 of them. We also have long shots and player prop episodes teed up and an opening day preview on the way. And finally, during the regular season, you can always count on us on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday mornings to be giving out our weekly best bet advice in our podcast episodes. So if you don't want to miss out on any of our Major League Baseball coverage, be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star rating review. It can be positive, it can be negative, but we're looking for those 5 stars to keep the rating up, to be able to spread the gospel of what we're doing here at the Action Network when it comes to the Diamonds. And with that, we jump in to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Their price to win the NL West here in 2025. Oh my God, it is minus 650. We'll start with that question for you first, Sean. Have you seen a team prohibitively priced to this degree in recent years?
Not that I can remember. They're even minus 200 to get a first round bye. So, even that seems like a much better bet than the minus 650, but that's still 67% implied to get a first round bye in the National League. Now, I bet the Dodgers under last year. I think it was around the same number, 103.5, 104.5. I've seen as high as 105 this year. I think at that number, you can start considering betting the under, but I'm at 101.8 on this team. A lot of the public projections out there have them around 96 to 98 games. I believe Pacoda is alongside me at 103.4. So upper end of the projections say to pass. The average of those projections say that you probably can bet the under, but my overall take on this Dodgers team is of the Ohtani era. He's 31 now. Freddie Freeman's 35. Mookie Betts is in his mid-30s. I do think this will be the best Dodgers team that they have while Ohtani is there, and likely that means this is the best Dodgers team of all time. So I'm not really interested in betting this team to not win 105 games. They don't necessarily have to put on the foot on their gas pedal too aggressively, but they have so much more starting pitching depth and bullpen depth than they had coming into last season. So they replaced Jack Flaherty and Walker Buehler, who were both limping to the finish line, with Roki Sasaki, who looks unbelievable in spring, and Blake Snell, who's a 2-time Cy Young winner, was one of the best pitchers in baseball last year once he was finally healthy, and I think has a legitimate chance to win a 3rd Cy Young with the Dodgers. But the Dodgers don't really have a need to push any of their starting pitchers past the 150, 160 inning mark. I think guys like Sasaki are going to finish closer to 100 innings, 120 innings. So as short of a price as Sasaki is for National League Rookie of the Year, I would be very cautious. Even though the stuff is elite, even though he's going to be phenomenal the times he actually pitches. And last year we did see a bit of a change in Rookie of the Year voting in terms of voters voting for the guy who had the best season, regardless of how much he played, as opposed to voting for the guy with the higher wins above replacement total, which was Jackson Merrill. So maybe a slight change in voting with Rookie of the Year last year, not voting for the most valuable guy, quote unquote, just voting for the guy who had the best season. Maybe Sasaki can still win it in 120 innings if he's unbelievable. But that said, they do seem to have much more depth than they had going into last year. They have other arms like Dustin May, who are coming back from Tommy John surgery. They also added to their lineup. They added Michael Conforto. They added Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates to their bullpen. So they took care of a lot of the issues in terms of depth that they had last year. This team also sustained like a number of injuries throughout the year. Mookie Betts went down for a while. Freddie Freeman spent a week in the hospital with his kid. They had multiple starting pitching injuries where they were just filling in gaps with, prospects, decent prospects, but not guys, they would ideally be firing, and not 5 of the top 30 starting pitchers in baseball, which they'll have this year with Ohtani going back into the rotation. So this Dodgers team is absolutely stacked. I'm not really interested in fading them. I'm not really interested in taking too many World Series or National League pennant stabs against them. There's only one team I bet. You can go back to the NL East pod for that. The most optimistic World Series projection for the Dodgers is at 26% from ATC. That's plus 285 implied odds. Their best available odds are plus 265. So I don't think there's any way you can find value betting positively things on the Dodgers. You can bet the under 104.5 at Caesars. That's about it. In terms of stat leaders, Ohtani, RBI leader, hits leader, both interesting, but also just keep in mind the fact that he's going to be pitching again this year. He's probably not going to get, every single day in the lineup. He's not going to go from the rotation back into the lineup like he was with the Angels because the Dodgers are stacked and they don't need to push him too aggressively. They're not going to get him hurt. So maybe, Ohtani only plays 150 games at the age this year, 145, which it makes that more difficult to win the hits leader or RBI leader category, certainly. I think of the two, I prefer RBI leader. I projected him second. I don't normally bet leadoff hitters in this category, but he finished first in the second half with 61 ribbies while leading off, and he was 14 ahead of third place, which was Jose Ramirez. So if Aaron Judge gets hurt, Ohtani is very much in the RBI leader mix. And 12-1, I projected it closer to plus 600. So 7-1 or better on Ohtani RBI leader. If you're choosing for RBI leader, I would pick Judge or Ohtani. I think there's value on both of them, but I'm going to go with the guy with better odds.
It's interesting you brought up the fact that they're prohibitively priced to such a degree, and when you crack down into the math, it just doesn't make sense to have a bet tied up for half of the year essentially. And sometimes we discuss the potential of, hey, say they get off to a slow start in April and their number moves.
Mm-hmm.
But with the Dodgers being such a public team and having these expectations heaped upon them, could you even see them slide north of 3-1 if, say, they lose 2 or 3 series to start the season and then all of a sudden there's a mini panic? I personally don't see a narrative like that playing out just because this roster is loaded top to bottom, the number one payroll in baseball. It just doesn't have any appreciable weaknesses. And as you also mentioned, it has such depth that even if they do struggle with some injuries early, they're just plugging in, above average players at nearly every role on the team. So do you think that's kind of a fool's errand to wait around for a better number with the Dodgers?
I think it can only go up essentially, so maybe not. Last year they opened plus 800. By opening day, they were plus 350. They remain north of plus 300 all the way until the divisional series. They were plus 340 as the divisional series. So you could have gotten the same number on the Dodgers heading into the NLDS against the Padres that you could have bet them on March 28th, essentially going into spring training. So there's no rush to bet the Dodgers if you like them. The price isn't going to improve, and it's probably not going to, or the price may only improve, and it's not going to get worse probably until they win one playoff series. Like, there's only so much you can shorten the line that's assuming they're going to, have a harder path to getting where they're already supposed to go, which is to the number one seed in the National League. So, unless they start slow and the Braves start really hot and the Braves seem like they have a better chance of getting home field advantage in the playoffs, that's the only time the Dodgers line is really probably going to float up. But it also doesn't have anywhere down to go either. So there's no rush to betting this team either direction.
All right, next up in the pecking order, the Arizona Diamondbacks plus 750 to win the West. They won 89 games last year, finished third, missed the playoffs via tiebreaker working against them. Even so, it's been a magical run lately for the Snakes, World Series run. Then they improve on their regular season wins year over year. Last year, despite having an average payroll by Major League Baseball standards, their win total set at 86.5 coming into this season. What are your thoughts on the Diamondbacks?
I really like the Diamondbacks roster. Their pitching is super deep. Ryan Nelson is a guy who was breaking out for them at the end of last year, and he can't even make their opening day rotation. I believe he's their number 6 starter. They have guys even behind him who I trust as well, and they also, they have a pretty complete lineup. They have Jordan Lawler, who's been one of my favorite minor league prospects in recent years. He's had trouble staying healthy. They just signed Geraldo Perdomo to an extension, which was a little goofy as well in terms of getting Lawler playing time. But even beyond the roster they already have built, I think they have guys who can come and contribute. They have a really strong bench. Alec Thomas can't even make their, regular outfield anymore. He's their 4th outfielder, 5th outfielder, if you consider Randall Grichuk. So this is actually a very deep regular season roster to me, a team that I expect to make the playoffs, not comfortably, but more often than a team like the Padres or the Giants or even, the second place, whatever team finishes second place in the Central. I have the Diamondbacks as the 4th best team in the National League. Offseason, they added Corbin Burns, traded for Josh Naylor, lost Christian Walker, lost Jock Peterson, lost Paul Sewald and Josh Bell. But I still think a net positive in terms of those upgrades. I make them about minus 210 to make the playoffs. I bet them around minus 125. If you look around the public projection market, there's some projections that have this team as low as 83 wins, but in the aggregate, everybody has them, or not everybody, most projections have them winning about 86, 87 games or above, as high as 91. and I'm at 86.4, and I still show them at minus 210 to make the playoffs. So I'm at like the midpoint of that projection. There's certainly projections even more optimistic than mine on Arizona making the playoffs. One way I really like to bet this, considering the Dodgers are projected to beat the Diamondbacks by 16 games, 18 games. Dodgers first place, Diamondbacks second place. You can bet exactas at some books. You can just bet the Diamondbacks to finish in second place at other books. I would bet that down to about plus 150, though. I gave that early in February at about 2-1. So D-backs to finish exactly in second to make the playoffs. And then also, I love Corbin Carroll props this year. He strained his back in spring, but he got back in the lineup, went back to hitting. He's been crushing in spring, too. This is a guy who dealt with injuries at the start of last year, changed some mechanics, early sophomore slump, but he eventually found his way back. And in the second half, he was the MLB runs leader, 61 runs. He finished 5th overall with 121 runs scored. He's the most valuable base runner in baseball. And he gets on base a ton too. He's a guy who walks a ton, not a guy you want to bet for hits leader because he walks a lot. But Carroll, every time he walks, he basically gets to second base, and then it only takes one base hit to get him in, or he goes from first to third a ton as well. So Corby Carroll, the most valuable base runner in baseball. I project him third in runs scored at the end of the year. I think he wins the category around 13% of the time. So, or I should say around 10% of the time. So 20-1 for runs leader, bet that down to about 10-1. And then steals leader, I like him as well. You could bet that down to plus 750 in NL MVP. He finished third in WAR in the second half of last year behind Ohtani and Lindor. I think 45-1 is way too long on Corbin Carroll. I like that down to about 25-1, considering where I projected for 2025. And just note, Ichiro is the only offensive MVP winner since 2000 to finish with an OPS below 850. Carroll was, I think, around 860 in his rookie year, fell below 700 last year, but he was above 850 in the second half of last season. So the talent is certainly there, just needs to keep it together for a full year. But I really like that runs leader bet. I like this Diamondbacks offense this season, and hitting atop that order, he should really be in contention. That's one of my favorite player props.
Here at Action Network, we're always in favor of cross betting, cross sport references. You mentioned being at the track, little horse betting reference. An exacta box, is there any chance that Arizona finishes first and the Dodgers finish second? Is there maybe just a sprinkle on that? Do you see any path for the Snakes to win the division? And if so, I mean, that would be a huge payout, obviously, with the Dodgers getting nudged out of the first place perch.
I think I'd rather just bet them to win the NL pennant at that point, or to win the World Series. If they're winning the NL West, they have a bye seed, or if they have a bye, which means they would only need to put in 2 series just to make the World Series. So if you like that, probably go ahead and bet their NL pennant odds at that point. I'd imagine you get a much better number. I ultimately don't see it. I mean, I have this team at 86.5 wins. I have the Dodgers at 101.8. I have Arizona at 86.5. So a 15-win gap is kind of outside of the range of variance within a season. A 10-win gap, you might be able to overcome. 15 is really getting, in terms of the standard deviation where you expect these teams to finish, that's like a 1% outcome, in my opinion.
All right, on to the team that finished second in the NL West last year. Of course, that is the San Diego Padres. They are priced at plus 850 to go ahead and win the West. They won 93 games last season, and it was a bit of a surprise, at least to some casuals like myself, because they moved on from Soto, yet they improved by 11 games year over year. They battled the Dodgers in the NLDS, and they came within 3 runs in the final game of knocking the World Series champs out. So, coming into this season, just a game off of the projection, at least from win total perspective for Arizona, sitting at 85.5. Talk to me about the Padres.
Yeah, the Padres have gone down this preseason. The Diamondbacks have gone up. I bet the Padres under 87.5 early. That was my favorite win total under when I bet it. It's before they signed Nick Pivetta. They were still talking about trading Dylan Cease at the time, talking about trading Michael King. They said yesterday they're not going to. They're going to hold on to those guys going into the season. But Dylan Cease, Luis Arraez both remain free agents next year. And I think if the Padres are around 500 or, fighting for a playoff spot, there's a chance they may trade both of those guys and not be buyers at the deadline, which they typically are. They're going through an ownership battle right now. The former owner, Peter Sider, unfortunately passed away and apparently left the wife to his team. And my wife is a trusted estates attorney, so this is a reminder to all of you to make sure to handle your affairs while you have, time to while you're alive, because there's now an ownership battle going on over the Padres between Peter Seidler's wife and the brothers of Peter Seidler, who have taken control of the team from MLB. So ownership battle going on makes it difficult for the owners to invest more money in the team. The brothers may end up selling the team, which is part of the reason the wife is, worried that they took control of the team. So all of these things, add up to, do the Padres spend money this year? Do they add anything to their roster? Probably not. The Minnesota Twins in the same boat, looking to sell the team. The Rays, the news came out yesterday, MLB trying to make Stu Sternberg sell the team. So you have the Twins, you have the Padres, and you have the Rays, who are all like, we're probably not going to add anything this year. If anything, we're going to subtract and look to the future or just stay put. So the Padres added Nick Pivetta, but they lost Tanner Scott. Jurickson Profar went to Atlanta. They lost Ha-Seong Kim to Tampa Bay. And then Kyle Higashioka, who's basically playing 50% of their games at catcher, also left. I think he went to Texas. And if you remove the PECOTA projection, which is at 87 wins, from the public projection sample, the rest of the projections only average out to 82.9 wins. I'm at 84.1. I think this is a team that misses the playoffs. In terms of their win total, I think it could be very close now to where Arizona was last season, where they won 89 games, but didn't end up getting in due to a tiebreaker. So at this point, I prefer the Padres to miss the playoffs as opposed to their win total under, just because at 85.5, I don't see value. Again, I'm at 84. But I do view this team as about 40% likely to make the playoffs, which is pretty much in line with both PECOTA, which is pretty much in line, I should say, with the public market. PECOTA was the highest projection at 87. They only have them at 60%, so minus 150. But everybody else has this team at about 40% to make the playoffs. I put the composite at minus 150. I would lay it up to minus 125. I took plus money earlier in the offseason. I think you could still get around minus 105 to minus 110 on the Padres to miss the playoffs. So just the team that's unlikely to add. Fernando Tatis never stays healthy over a full season. Maybe they do finally get a full year from him, but also his production has declined since he came back from his PED suspension. The one positive way I want to bet on this team is Jackson Merrill in terms of MLB hits leader this season. My concern with betting it is he's going to hit third, and I like to bet leadoff hitters or guys hitting in the number 2 hole for hits leader just because of the plate appearances. Over the course of a season, every time you move down a spot in the batting order, you lose about 15 to 20 plate appearances over the course of a full year from that lineup spot adjustment. But Merrill also was hitting around 7th, 8th in the order for a large part of last season, and then moved up slowly throughout the year. So he should, in theory, get a lot more opportunity than he had last season. And in terms of bat to ball ability, he was the only hitter along with Marcell Ozuna to finish, I believe, in the top 30 in all 3 quadrants of the strike zone in terms of offensive production. He got much better as the year went on. He was 4th in WAR over the second half of the season, as I mentioned, behind Corbin Carroll, Francisco Lindor, Shohei Ohtani. So Jackson Merrill, an incredibly valuable player. Jackson Chourio was 5th, by the way. So these youngsters really climbing up the leaderboards. Carroll, Chourio, Merrill. I don't know if he's an MVP candidate, but I do think for hits leader, 25-1, I projected him closer to 7% in that category. So Merrill hits leader about 20-1 or better looks like a good bet, and Padres to miss the playoffs is the best way to bet the team.
So we see a big drop off as we get to the bottom 2 teams in the NL West. We'll start with the San Francisco Giants at 35-1 to win the division, 80-82 last season, a 4th place finish. The Giants were once the West Coast power. They won 3 World Series in a 5-year span from 2010 to 2014. And then since then, they've had 6 losing seasons and just 1 NL West title. Their win total this year set at 80.5. How are you playing them out in the Bay?
No bet on the Giants, but I guess this is a team I'm expecting to bet on during the season in terms of money line bets. I think there's going to be a culture shift there this year. Willy Adames is a true leader, a clubhouse leader, and the fact that Buster Posey was finally able to bring in a star for this team, a potentially culturally shifting superstar, I think is very meaningful. They missed out on the famous Arson Judge tweet. They missed out on Bryce Harper, I believe Trey Turner as well. Obviously, Ohtani, they offered as much money as the Dodgers. I don't know if they had the deferred, aspect that the Dodgers had in their contract, but just haven't been able to sign free agents under Farhan Zaidi. Finally got a big one under Buster Posey, and they also brought in Justin Verlander too. And Verlander is effectively like a coach on the field, an additional pitching coach for some of these guys. I've seen him working on pitch grips. with some of their pitchers. They generally seem to have decent pitching development as an organization. They just haven't been able to develop hitters. But Heliot Ramos kind of broke out a little bit last year. The lineup does look a lot better for this season than it has in years past. And if they're able to get, a league average offense with above average pitching, they could be in the wild card hunt. I view them at this point pretty comfortably behind the Braves, Mets, Phillies, Dodgers, and D-backs. So that leaves one spot for the Padres, the Giants, or whoever finishes second in the NL Central for the final wild card spot, right? Or not even, because it's Atlanta, Mets, Philly, Dodgers, Arizona, and then the NL Central champion, and that's your entire playoff field. So who do they hop, right? They have to hop Arizona in order to get in, and then they probably, if Arizona is as good as I expect them to be, you would need one of Philly or the Mets to fall off, or the Braves to fall off again. So there's just a very difficult path in the National League, because there's 5 teams in the West and the East that I think are pretty comfortable playoff teams, and then the NL Central champion is your 6th team. So it's just difficult to see the path for the Giants. I think they'll be better than they were in recent years. I think you'll see them push closer to, not to that 100 win mark when they won the division, but closer to 85 wins this season. I like them more than where I project them at 82.7, but I'm also towards the higher end of the public market, which is as low as 78 and as high as 83.2. So it's a pass for me on the Giants. The one guy I want you to keep an eye on is Bryce Eldridge. It's a 2-way prospect when they drafted him. He's going to stick around as a hitter. He's a big kid. I think he's 6'7". He has crazy power. And the Giants do, in theory, have a place to upgrade at first base with Lamont Wade. I like Lamont Wade, but if they're looking for more power in that lineup, a guy who could potentially hit 45-plus homers for them one day, even in that ballpark, I think Bryce Eldridge is the dude, and somebody they're clearly giving it bats to in spring training. I don't think he'll make the opening day roster. He's also been struggling a little bit, but if he goes down for 4 weeks and starts hitting a AAA, and then they bring him back up, he's certainly a guy to keep a name on, or a name to keep an eye on in the NL Rookie of the Year race. It's 100-1 currently, but may get a better number if he gets sent down.
We finish up with the Colorado Rockies, 500-1. They should be, 5,000, 50,000. They're not going to win the NL West. They were 61 and 101 last season. Woof. The worst 2 seasons in franchise history, back-to-back. 204 losses in total in the last 2 seasons. Can they do anything to pull out of this tailspin, or is it more fun to kind of just root for their continued demise and try to take them to have the most losses in Major League Baseball this season?
I think that might be the approach. If you're looking for a team to bet for a loss leader that's not the White Sox, and we talked about the Miami Marlins on the NL East pod as the other possibility, the public projection views the Rockies as the worst team in baseball this year. 61.1 on average. They have the White Sox at 62.6 and the Marlins at 65.6. So a full win below the White Sox. Keep this in mind too. The lowest win projection for the Rockies coming into the year is at 54.8. That's more than 10 wins below the White Sox lowest win projection last season. The White Sox were expected to win at minimum of 65 games in 2024. They won like half that, nearly, right? Close to 40 wins, 39 wins. So that's 3 wins clear of the Marlins' lowest win projection for this season. And I personally can't get there just because of where I put the White Sox. I have the White Sox pretty much in line with the market. I'm at 53.1. So it's not something I'm betting, but if you trust all the other public projections out there, if you just ignore my projection, if you want a plus money bet on a team to finish as the Major League loss leader, the Rockies are interesting. Here's why I wouldn't bet it. Coors Field, because it's so goofy, the Rockies just accidentally win 45% of their home games there every year. If you look at Action Labs, you can see they dominate the first game of a series against new teams coming there. I think there's an adjustment going in and an adjustment going out of Coors Field. You also see teams struggle the first game they move away from Coors Field. There's that Coors hangover effect you've probably heard of. But there's also like a Coors introduction effect that people may not realize, where teams go there. I think hitters try to keep their same like swing on the baseball that they do at other parks, or they may even try to load up for more power, assuming the ball is just going to fly out of the yard there. And then they realize, no, I can just dink and dunk base hits all day and, finish 4 for 5 if I just put like a B swing on the baseball and try to lift it above the shortstop or second baseman into the outfield. And once that adjustment happens, I do think teams perform a little bit better the second, third, fourth game of the series, of Coors Field. But as I said, it's just very difficult for the Rockies to lose more than 55% of their home games. And if they're going to win 35 home games, you only need to go 26 and 45, 25 and 56 on the road in order to clear 61 and a half games, which is a 50-win full season pace. So it's actually very difficult for the Rockies to go under 61 and a half. But if you trust those public projections, if you think, the White Sox have a chance to win 60 games, you could bet on the Rockies as the loss leader. It's a pass for me. But just note that thing with Coors Field, and note for betting Rockies games this year. First game of a series at home against teams coming in. That's generally where you're going to find the edge with them. It seems like there is an adjustment moment that teams make when they go there for the first game.
With Major League Baseball right around the corner, now is the perfect time to get yourself an Action Pro account. Get real-time pick alerts from experts like Sean Zerillo, access to Sean Kerner's strikeout prop projections, and more. Right now, new subscribers can get $20 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/pro and use promo code POD20. That's promo code POD20 for $20 off an entire year. So you'll be covered for March Madness, the NBA, the upcoming Major League Baseball season, plus next season's college football and NFL slates as well. Don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/pro right now and use promo code POD20 to get $20 off a year of Action Pro. All right, let's close it up here in the NL West with some of your favorite win total bets, as well as stat leader awards and best bets.
Yeah, the Padres under, if you can get it at 86, I think the best I saw was 85.5. The Padres under at 86 or better would be my favorite win total in this division. Ultimately, it's the only win total I have in the division. I'd probably prefer, at the same numbers where they are currently, Padres to miss the playoffs up to minus 125. That goes hand in hand with the Diamondbacks to make the playoffs, which is my favorite bet for this division. Diamondbacks to make the playoffs, I would bet up to minus 130. And then that NL West exacta, as we mentioned, Dodgers to finish in first, D-backs to finish in second, bet down to plus 150. You could also just bet the D-backs to finish in second place, down to plus 150. And then my favorite player, stat leader bet, Corbin Carroll, runs leader at 20-1, would bet that down to about 10-1. Just to reiterate, he was the runs leader over the second half of the season once he was finally healthy, played much better. And he's just the guy who scores more runs than you expect based upon how much he's on base because of how good of a base runner he is. He advances and takes extra bases more than any other player. His sprint speed actually declined last year, which was very interesting. He went from top 3 in the league to being closer to 28th, 30th. I don't know if we just have more guys running fast or, if the injuries had something to do with that. But I'm happy he's healthy going into the year now. There was an injury scare in spring training. I think he had some back soreness. And he's a guy who in his profile, has had injuries in the past, shoulder injury that you worry about. So not 100% certainty that he's going to play the entire season. But if he does, I do expect him to be in the top 3 for runs.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Payoff Pitch. One step closer to completing all 6 of the divisional previews. Make sure to download the free award-winning Action Network app to follow our action experts so you can track what they're betting as well as your own picks. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to catch all of our division previews here at Payoff Pitch. For Sean Zerillo, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Payoff Pitch.